for tuning in today to another Front Porch Conversation here at Advent Christian Village. We're on the front porch of the Copeland Community Center. And I want to introduce you to the guest today, Evelyn Walden. Evelyn, thank you for being here and sitting down with me on the porch.
Well, you are quite welcome. Thanks for inviting me.
Oh, you're welcome, Evelyn. Tell our viewers where you live now. And
Okay, I'm a resident of Riverwoods, and I've probably been there in November will be 3 years, I believe. I started to look it up because, you don't always remember these. But I'm coming up on my 3-year anniversary of moving here to Dowling Park, Advent Christian.
Evelyn, where were you born and where did you grow up?
Well, I was born in Jacksonville, Florida. And at the time, my family was not living there. They had already moved back toward Gainesville. My father was a veteran from World War II. And he was going to a radio school, I believe, up in that area. And they were living there for a while. But for some reason, my mother particularly liked that doctor that she had. And she continued her care up there. So I happened to be the only child she had born in Jacksonville. And that's most interesting because I didn't have to really think about that until when I was in high school. We were taking Spanish and we were supposed to introduce ourselves. Mm-hmm. And I liked the way it came out, Hoxenvilliers.
Oh.
Nacio Hoxenvilliers. So that was an interesting thing.
It doesn't make it sound very...
Exactly.
But it's better than what the name was originally in English.
Exactly.
Which was Calford.
Yeah, well, there you go.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, then we moved into Alachua County. I spent most of my years in Walden, Florida, which maybe you only know because it was a speed trap.
On 301, anyway, right?
Yes, right on 301. And maybe 12 miles or so from Gainesville. I attended school there at the school, and unfortunately the school is closed down now. But at one time it was a high school. When my father was there, it was a high school. And then after that it closed down. And, most recently. But we went to the 8th grade through there, and then we rode the bus and into Gainesville. And so I graduated from Gainesville High School. And from there, I went on to the University of Florida and spent 4 years there. So that sort of sums up, when I graduated, I had a degree in education. So I was looking for a teaching job. And at that time, there were more teachers than they knew what they needed to do with. So we had to travel a long way. I had to actually go on a road trip to find a job. And I actually drove quite by accident out to Gilchrist County and applied there, and they offered me a job in Bell. So that was my first teaching job.
So that's not far from here, even closer than Gainesville. Well, Evelyn, one of the things I really enjoy about these conversations is finding things that people have in common. And yesterday when we were talking, you and I were both born in the same hospital in Jacksonville, St. Vincent's. And there'll be some more things along that path, right?
Exactly. Yes, which we've already aware of, yes.
Let's go back and talk about an early childhood memory. What were some of your favorite childhood memories growing up?
Well, Waldo at that time was, had a few more people, and we had a lot of, people around to play with. The school was kind of the center of the town, and I can remember carnivals, fall carnivals and things of that nature. The school had some excellent teachers. I think when we finally made it over to the high school, we never found that we were behind in any way. Maybe a little in math, but, not so much in other areas. But we had some excellent teachers. And we had one teacher, 4th grade teacher, who just loved to do operettas. And so she would gather the whole school. The older kids would do the speaking part, but we would be the chorus. And I can still remember the songs that we learned and the parts that we played for those, and that was a really wonderful thing. And of course, another of my memories was the church, and I went to the Episcopal Church in Waldo, and it was there that I met Father Yerkes, who was the scoutmaster and mentor during that time, and the church activities are wonderful. He used to pack us all up in his car and take us to different Episcopal churches to go to events. And it was a good time. There were a lot of kids around, so we would ride our bikes. I'd ride my bike all the way out there past where you used to visit, and that was a long ride. But we'd ride bikes and do those things to have walks, and a lot of things that made it a happy time, for us.
Well, I will tell the viewers that when Evelyn attended one of the newcomer luncheons, we were seated at the same table. And she had said she was from Alachua County, so after we got through going around, I said to Evelyn, well, where in Alachua County? She said, well, it's a small town. And I said, well, what is it? I said, she said, Waldo. And I said, that's where my grandmother lived and my mother grew up, and my aunts and uncle. And then we decided who she was, and you want to take up the story from there?
Yes. That was such amazing, because they talk about it being a small world, and I had been invited to this get-together here for new members. And I was a little nervous because I really didn't know anybody, but Ann sat at my table, and when we started talking, we discovered that our families were interconnected and that we had actually met each other when we were teenagers. Because I can remember her coming to our church, and of course our connection was with Father Yerkes, who was the pastor to a lot of the churches. So I can still remember, believe it or not, I can still remember Ann coming in. Of course, I was up front with the choir, but I can remember her coming in with her grandmother and aunt, and coming to the service. It was a small church, so if we had a visitor, it was like
that stood out, like you were ready, something hot yellow or something.
Exactly.
Well, and I would have never been invited to be in the choir, so I'm glad you were there. And it was such a small church that the priest, Father Yerkes, traveled to other churches as well. But I can remember that he would come flying in, almost literally, to do the service and be sure everything was set, and then start the service, and then he would move over and play the organ and go back and forth. I mean, he was
multi-talented. He really was. We would be sitting inside waiting for him to fly in from I think he served 5 churches every Sunday morning. He served all the missions, even though he was an archdeacon for the diocese, and that's a desk job. But he loved the people so much that he would travel, to different churches to have service. And he even, talking about playing music, he would take my sister sometimes because she played the organ, and he would take a portable organ and set it up in Earlton, where the place used to be. I don't know how many people they had come. But yes, it was nothing for him to come back down, and play the music and then run back up front and do the sermon too. So he was multitasking, to say the least.
And a part of that connection that I realized, my mother grew up and went to Waldo to school, and just like you did, and then went to Gainesville High School.
Gainesville High School, yes, right.
When you mentioned Earlton, talk a little bit about that area and how it's changed.
Okay, well, that was one of our swimming holes, actually. We had 2. One was Hampton Lake, and the other was Earlton. But someone from our school actually had a fish camp out there, so I think it was called Buddy's Landing. And so we would all gather up, go out there. You could always go out there to swim in Lake Santa Fe. And that's one of the beauties of that county, is that Santa Fe Lake. Of course, it's in other counties as well. Mm-hmm. It's in Clay and Bradford, but it really extends to a lot of places. It's a huge lake, but we would always go out there and swim. That was, one of the activities that we had as a young child, and it hasn't changed much when you go out there now. Of course, I'm sure it's built up some, but there's a little road that you have to take to go down by there, and it's interesting because it's a beautiful thing. Beautiful part of Florida back in there. It's
part of the Florida that, if you haven't lived in Florida most of your life, you wouldn't realize was there.
No, you wouldn't.
I call it the real old Florida.
Exactly. But Waldo has a canal that leads to Lake Alto, which is not a good swimming lake because it has that tannic acid in it that makes the water real brown. And unless you've got your eyes closed, you don't want to get in that water. But it was good fishing. which we did. We did a lot of. But it leads to a canal that leads to there was a system back in there during the day. Not when I was around, but supposedly that's how they traveled on that canal system. And the canal, there was a canal that actually led to the Lake Santa Fe. So.
And I think back, it was a big produce growing area early on, and that was how they shipped a lot of the stuff, the produce to markets or to a train. And the train used to go through Waldo too.
Oh, without a doubt, and that was that was really great because you could hop the train and ride up to the North Carolina, which I eventually got up there. And it didn't stop in Gainesville; it stopped in Waldo, so people would have to hop on a taxi and. That made us special.
That's
and
right.
I know when I went the last time I was probably riding it, I had to go buy a ticket somewhere else. But that was special, The trains were a special part of that.
Mm-hmm.
And I know my grandfather was a train man. He was a conductor on the railroad, so that was an important part of Waldo.
And so was one of my uncles. So there's another connection. Evelyn, tell us about your first job.
Well, my first job, actually, back in the day, we worked everywhere. During the summers, I worked at the YMCA camp in Keystone and washing dishes. And when I was through with that, I taught water skiing. You have to multitask back in the day. Did a lot of babysitting back in the day. When I started going to the University of Florida, I worked as a college work study, mostly in the law library. And then, of course, after I graduated, I teaching. Taught 1 year in Bell, 4th grade. I was an elementary teacher. And then my sisters at that time were in North Carolina, so I chose to move up there and be with them.
And how long did you teach?
I taught for 31 years. And, it was time. I know I was in my early 50s, but at that time, I had, taught what I called the inner city kids, Title I, the Chapter 1 kids who needed extra help at risk. And even though the class size was small, it was pretty, it took a lot of energy. And so after I had my years put in, I decided, it was time to, and that's awful to rush through 30 years like that. But the good thing about my teaching is that, you always hope that you'll make an impact on somebody's life when you're a teacher, and probably in other areas as well, but especially in that. So my last several years of teaching, I was actually teaching school with 2 of my former students. They were actually teachers, and so that was...
Oh, really?
Yes, and they were from that at-risk population, and so that meant a lot to me that, I had made a difference in their lives, perhaps. And also, it turns out that I have 2 kids, and they're not kids, they're adults, they're in their 40s. So my daughter lives in Newberry, and she's a teacher. And my son lives in North Carolina, and he was in the military for 20 years, but he did some teaching. He's decided not to do that now, but he did some teaching as well. So it kind of ran in the family, I guess.
And now I think you have a granddaughter who's teaching too?
No, that would be I don't. They're not doing that yet. They're still in school.
Oh, okay.
Yes, they're still in school. But I do have, I have 4 grandchildren, and one of them lives up in North Carolina with my son, and then there's, 2 of them actually live in North Carolina now. And then I've got 2 of them down here, and they're still in school, so I don't know whether they want to be teachers or not, but we'll soon find out.
That's right. Well, it's a different day for teachers right now. I just really keep them in my prayers and the whole school system.
And they certainly need it because, this COVID teaching is something different. It really is. And my daughter is going to have to do both in the same day. I don't know if she's going to have to do it one while she's doing the other, but she went back for the first day yesterday.
So by doing both, you mean she'll teach virtually as well as a in-person class?
I should have asked, but I don't know if it's all at the same time. But, everybody's a little uneasy because we just don't know what it's going to bring. And so she sent a picture of herself in her room with her mask on and said, day 1 is down.
Evelyn, you talked about teaching students and then having them be teachers with you. What are some other special memories of your time as a teacher?
Well, let's see. We did a lot of, at that time, writing. I remember writing was coming in, it was starting. I'm old enough around to tell you that it wasn't always a part of the school curriculum. Mm-hmm. And so I was one of the teachers who was chosen to actually teach writing, go off and be trained in writing. So I won I guess what you call a scholarship to the University of Wilmington. It was a writing project, and I actually submitted an article about Marjorie Kennan Rollins was a famous writer from Florida, and her home is actually close to where I live, and I had been to visit the home, and her writing materials were laying out there, plus I had read her works. And she mentioned in there about how she was able to manipulate the characters at what she wanted in them, and that was so meaningful to me. So I submitted a essay about that experience with writing, and I was selected to go to the writing project, Cape Fear Writing Project. So I was there for 3 weeks at the University of Wilmington, and I was actually able to get some graduate credits too for that period of time. Learned a lot, and was able to take a lot of back to the school to teach. They couldn't send everybody, so they would choose the one that was most likely to come back and share, and that would have been me, because I really wanted to learn. It was important. And so I was able to bring the writing information back to my school and teach other teachers, and I really enjoyed that time, and I learned a lot, and writing was just starting to be added on, and I found myself visiting other classrooms to teach writing, and it was really a good experience. We went to a lot of, another thing that I remember up there is we went to a lot of field trips around that area. That, Florida was my home state, and I knew some, a goodly portion about the history, but nothing about North Carolina. So we would go on field trips to different places and visit different things, and that was always interesting to learn more about the state. We went to the Capitol, and everybody went to the Capitol. I guess it made a difference that the Capitol was only 60 miles away, and maybe it's farther here for some other kids here, but that was something that almost everybody did in North Carolina, was to go up and visit Raleigh.
I think in Florida, the 4th grade is history. And I know when I was in school and when my children were in school, we all did trips to Tallahassee, and that was more like 150 miles. So,
yeah, well,
so I guess everybody did.
They're still doing that.
I don't know. That's been a few years since they've been in school too. But
4th grade was the grade I taught, so that was probably why I, did that. And but yeah, there were a lot of good experiences. I met a lot of good friends, and learning is. I still even help my daughter with her. She wants me to come in sometimes to help with her teaching. I haven't done that yet. Probably won't do it until they find something for the COVID, but she shares her stories with me. But it was a good time, and it was a giving time. When you're in education, it's not the money that keeps you there, because it's certainly not what it should be, but that's what it's about. And
then at some point you moved back to Florida?
I did. When I retired from teaching when I was 52. We won't talk about how old I am now. But at that time, my mother was she was by herself. My dad had died, and my brother-in-law got really sick, so I decided it was time for me to come back to Florida. And at that time, I had already started working for Target. I don't know if we can talk about that.
We can talk about that.
You can bleep it out. But anyway, I was able to transfer with them. So I came down and I stayed with my mother to help out. And my mother's still alive, by the way. She's 95. And we're still, part of her care team. And so that's why I came down a little early. So I think it was in 2005 when I moved down here. Yeah. And so that's how I came down here.
And how did you come to know about the village?
Well, I actually went to a funeral of a lady who was my principal in second grade teacher. And later on, she selected me to be an intern at her school. And so she had been out here, and her son had told me that it was a wonderful place. And, I've stored that away in my mind because nothing was going on just then. But later on, we were thinking about my mother and what would work for her. So I made a visit out here one time all by myself. And I was so impressed with how happy everybody was. And there was a smile on everybody's face. And I said, that is so nice. And then, during that time I kept thinking that is such a nice place. And I only had my mother in mind, but I thought, what, this would be where I would want to come when it's time for me to come, I would like to come here. And so I made another visit with my younger sister. And it was even a more intense visit because we spent the night, which they would have you come in and spend the night. And we got a more in-depth tour, and it was wonderful. Everybody was friendly, and it was a beautiful place. We looked at all the opportunities, and when less than a year came, and I was looking to come, within a year of that time of me visiting, I was able to come out here. When I moved out 3 years ago, by the time it was time for me to move in, I had hurt my knee. But the neighbors were so friendly. Everybody came and helped, and they showered me with food and love, and so it was just a wonderful experience. And I've enjoyed my time here, and I make use of all the amenities when I can. And it's just, like I said, a beautiful place to be. I tell a lot of people it's going to be my last stop on earth, and I can only think of one other home that'll be better than this one is.
What have you done to get involved here at the village and in the area? Okay,
well, I was in the book club that we had at the library, which, and I was enjoying that. But, what's so nice about it is that, I would try to read all the books, but if there's one you didn't really like, it was okay. They didn't, keep you after school if you didn't read it. But I met a lot of people that way. I had a neighbor that moved into another spot, and I had friends that came out, so I was able to visit them in these other places and get involved in that. I would always go to the different parties that they would have at the dining area. Those were really nice. When they had special speakers, the arts thing, you invited me along to come to some of those events, and the toe tapping events where we could clap and sing to the music, and then some of the others as well. And so those were all the different things and there's other things. I enjoyed visiting the shops. And I like, I walk. A lot of people know me because I'm walking around the neighborhood a lot. And so these are kind of some of the things that I do. But that doesn't mean that, there's not other things that go on. Right. I'm kind of limited in my time because I'm still have to help with my mom. But, it's a good place to call home.
If you were to asked to give advice to a young person today, what advice would you give them?
Well, my advice to young people today would be to look for those things that you can add to your life that will always be important. I guess in our church we call it the rule of life. To add those things that are going to help you to make it through. I think education is very important, so I would advise not necessarily that they go to college, but that they learn some skill to help them along in that area, and that they increase their faith, that they always have a connection with God, because I know that's important, and it's important to other people too to have that a part of their lives. And take advantage of any opportunities they have in their jobs to learn, because I'm a lifelong learner, and I just know that it's real important. So that would be what I would tell them to do.
I know that I've heard you say you're a lifelong learner, and I love that statement. What have you been learning during COVID?
Well, actually, I go to St. Luke's Church in Live Oak, and y'all involved me in several. I say y'all because we've been together in our sessions. We've read several books. So, and I found out all about webinar and Zoom. So I've been involved in doing that. Never thought I'd be able to do that. And so all of our church meetings have been accomplished that way. There's not a book club, but I've been reading anyway. Mm-hmm. And whenever somebody suggests a book, even through our church, we do our book discussions online. So I've been doing that. My neighbor across the way loves to cook, so she gives me more food than what I need. So, we're all have some COVID weight gain, I believe.
That's right.
And I've been walking and trying to, because it's beautiful out here. It's just beautiful. And that would be the extent of it. Every once in a while, I might drive to Newberry or, to visit with my family over there, but I'm pretty stationary right here.
It's probably a good thing to be right now.
I think so.
When the COVID time is over, do you have a bucket list of things you want to do?
I certainly do. I would like to travel up to North Carolina because I have a family up there as well. So I'm looking forward to that. I do like to shop, even though I don't need anything. I call it retail therapy because even if you're not buying anything, you're walking around, and I started wearing my Fitbit again.
So you know how far you've been.
Getting in the steps. And so that would be another, another thing that I would do. I'm enjoying the village opening back up because I visited a lot of the stores around here and enjoyed that. And it was nice to be able to shop just a little far away distance from you. So I'm looking forward to that. Not eating more because I seem to have eaten plenty, But yeah, that's what I plan to do.
Well, Evelyn, thank you so much for sitting down with me and sharing today. And we want to thank our viewers and tune in again for another episode.